Hello, it's Ashley here from Paper&Twine. Welcome everybody. Welcome if you're new here. Welcome if you're used to my drivel. Hope you've all got a nice cup of something. The barista is ready to take your orders. I've got just a cup of black coffee this afternoon. Don't know what it's like where you are, but it's very cold here today. At about 10 o'clock last night, it was -4, which I think is quite cold. Anyway, what have I been up to? Not a lot. I had my Zoom call for Theatre Train this morning and spent a lot of time yesterday researching into the 1980s because we've got to do something based on the 1980s. Easy for dance, easy for music, because, you know, they can just go back and look and see what was happening then. A little bit more difficult on the drama front, but I thought I'd give you a little bit of a history lesson. And obviously I was alive in the 80s. How old was I? I would have been 15 in 1980. Can you see Blue behind me? She might pop up and make an appearance. She's been a funny little thing today. Anyway, let's have a little delve into the 1980s. So this is a general snapshot of what life was like in the early 80s in Britain. So Maggie Thatcher came to power in 1979. She was obviously the first female PM, and she did change the face of Britain for good or bad, whatever your view on politics is. I'm not going to get into politics. One of the things that she did do that has had a massive impact is she gave council house tenants the right to buy their houses, and prices soared from an average of 5,500 in the 70s to around 20,000 in 1981. She was a very controversial figure, obviously, but she did inspire many women to go out to work. My mum, I think after she got married, she didn't work full time. She stayed at home to look after me. She worked part-time. She did various jobs. But it was quite common for women to stay at home. But Thatcher made it okay for women to go out to work. And at one point in the 80s, 6 out of 10 women went out to work, which was the highest figure in any country in Europe. Obviously, that had a knock-on effect on how people lived their lives, because if women were going out to work, they weren't at home cooking and cleaning and doing all that kind of stuff. Or they still had to do that, but they had less time to do that. So innovations like microwaves became popular features in houses, and things like ready meals, which had never really been a thing before. I remember my grandma getting a microwave. She was a wonderful woman, my grandma. Both my grandmas were, but my dad's mum I lived with. We lived as an extended family, and got to know her better than my other grandma. But she had a microwave quite early on, and that was really interesting, actually. But the other thing about women going to work was, what did they wear? And trousers became more of a thing. And I came across this little article where a headmaster of a comprehensive school in Reading had locked 9 female teachers in a classroom because he was worried about these young women sullying the minds of the young pupils. I don't know how long they were locked in the classroom for, but it's a bit strange, isn't it? TV cooks such as Delia Smith, or Saint Delia as she's known in our house, and Keith Floyd were popular on TV, and they had an influence in what we ate. So out went things like steamed pudding and spotted dick, and in came pizzas and curries. I remember my mum buying pizzas from Sainsbury's and overcooking them, bless her. They were like biscuits by the time she finished with them. I'm sure if my mum watches this, she won't mind me saying she was not a brilliant cook. She was a fantastic baker and pastry cook. She did brilliant desserts, but no, dinners were not her forte, bless her. So pizzas and curries became popular. Marks and Spencer's developed the chicken Kiev, And I remember myself buying them. I used to work for Next, which I'll come on to later. And I worked in various branches, but for a long time I worked at the Enfield branch. And that was right next door to Marks and Spencer's. And on a Saturday, I used to go and buy dinner for me and the boyfriend I lived with at the time. And we had Marks and Spencer's chicken Kievs, potato croquettes and some salad. We had that every Saturday night for quite a while. But they were £1.99 when they were first introduced, which is equivalent to £10 in today's money. And I wonder whether we would spend £10 on a ready meal. I don't know. Yes, so I talked about Next. They actually opened in 1982. And again, I remember one of my school friends, I'm not in touch with her, so she won't see this, but Helen Simpson. She went to Next and she bought a white cotton shirt, and we were all really impressed because it came with 3 different detachable collars so that you could change the look of the shirt, which made it, you know, quite a reasonably priced item of clothing. Yeah, so I do remember Next opening. Obviously, the 80s saw a big rise in technology, the development of technology, and particularly in the music world with synthesizers and things like that. But in 1980, Sony introduced the Walkman to the UK, and it cost up to £125, which is equivalent to £440 in today's money. Cassette tapes and CDs were taking over from vinyl. Musical styles were many and varied. Do you remember the New Romantics? I'll tell you a story actually. One of my cousins lives in America, and he's just subscribed to my channel, bless him. And he used to come and see my grandma. He drove a TR7, and he had a little bit of a New Romantic phrase, if my memory serves me correct. And he wore some very, very tight black, I don't know whether they were leather, black trousers. And they were very tight and didn't leave much to the imagination. And my grandma said to him, "Where do you do old time dancing?" And he said, "Ballroom." And she said, "Yes, exactly what those trousers haven't got." So yeah, I remember that. I don't know whether he remembers that. But New Romantics died a death, but hip hop and rap were developed, which are obviously still very popular today. Popular toys of the 1980s were Rubik's Cubes, My Little Pony, Cabbage Patch dolls. They were so popular that people fought over them in toy shops when there were only 1 or 2 left on the shelves. And Sylvanian families, which I think are still a thing and are quite have quite a value on eBay, I think. In 1981, Britain was experiencing the worst recession since post-war years, and people wanted the good life. They wanted all these things that were coming in. They felt they were entitled to them, so personal borrowing soared, and people funded their purchases with credit cards, which became quite commonplace. I think in the 60s and 70s, personal borrowing was very much frowned upon. You know, it wasn't a good idea for people to go into debt. And the 80s was a spend decade, I think. So what inventions did we have in the 80s? In 1981, we had the CD. 1982, the camcorder. In 1985, Microsoft developed Windows. Where would we be without Windows? 1989, the World Wide Web was first proposed by Tim Berners-Lee. In 1987, we saw the first 3D video games and disposable contact lenses. From about 1981, home computers started appearing in people's houses. Before then, they were very expensive and very big. They would have taken up a lot of room, so they weren't popular at all. Obviously, in the 80s, mobile phone technology was developing. Initially, they were too expensive for most people, and they were targeted at travelling salesmen, businessmen in the city. Do you remember the yuppies of the 80s? Delivery drivers and builders. They were big. You quite often had to have a battery pack in the boot of your car, and they were known as bricks. In 1988, Motorola developed a particular model that weighed a kilogram. I don't know how much my phone weighs now, but it's certainly nowhere near a kilogram. That's, you know, a bag of sugar. Imagine holding that up to your ear all the time. But that particular model cost £2,990, which is £6,000 in today's money. And it wasn't just the cost of the phone. Call charges were really, really high. And you often had to subscribe to a provider as well. So it was very expensive. They were very much a status symbol. It's worth noting that at that time in the 1980s, mid-1980s, just over 50% of UK adults had a landline. So about 48% of people didn't have a landline in their homes. And I remember there being lots of phone boxes on street corners and things. And we just don't see phone boxes anymore, do we really? You might see them in a town centre, perhaps one or two, but they were everywhere when I was growing up. Today, 84% of adults in the UK own a smartphone. I couldn't tell you what the percentage of teenagers is, but I imagine it's equally as high. Other things of note in the 80s, Charles and Di were married, of course. That was a big fairy tale wedding, and everybody was waiting with bated breath to see what Diana's dress was like, weren't they? And I think it was the biggest outside broadcast that the BBC had done at that particular time. Sadly, of course, we know that the marriage didn't last. 1982 was the Falklands War, and Channel 4 began broadcasting. Now, I remember that well. We sat down to watch the first programme, which I think was Countdown, and we were big Brookside fans in our house. We used to watch the omnibus edition on a Saturday, and we used to go and sit in my grandma's lounge with my grandma and granddad, and my grandma'd make a pot of tea, and we'd sit and watch the omnibus edition of Brookside. It was very sad when that finished. 1983, front seat belts became compulsory for cars. And again, I remember being little and, you know, rolling around the back of the car when my dad was driving, not strapped in. We just wouldn't think of getting into a car now without seat belts, would we? It's just, it's become so ingrained in us. And do you remember those adverts? Clunk, click, every trip. Another thing that happened in 1983 was TV AM began broadcasting. I think today's youth would be very unsatisfied with the service of terrestrial TV in the early 80s, because we didn't have TV 24/7 and there was no streaming services, and cable was really not very much a thing at that time, was it? 1984 to 85 was the miners' strike, which again was very controversial. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm sure a lot of us remember it. One of my friends at uni, her dad was a miner, and I know that he was affected quite badly by it. 1985 was Live Aid. I'm just going to have a slurp of my coffee. I hope you're finding this interesting. I had great fun researching all this. So, of course, Bob Geldof and Midgeore, who I was great fans of, set up Live Aid to raise money and awareness of the famine that was happening in Ethiopia. 72,000 people attended at Wembley. My husband went. I did know him then, but we weren't together then. And 90,000 people attended the JFK Stadium in Philadelphia, and it was like a simultaneous big gig going on. Tickets in the UK were a reasonable £5, but there was a £20 donation on top. In today's money, that's about £76. So global events in no particular order. In 1980, John Lennon was suddenly assassinated outside his apartment building in New York. I remember the day at school, being at school and hearing the news about that. I was quite affected by it. The popular arcade game Pac-Man was released. In 1981, MTV was launched and the AIDS virus was identified. 1982, Japan begins selling first CD players. 1983, Motorola introduces the first mobile phones in America. Microsoft releases Word. I mean, where would we be without Word? I obviously, being a teacher, I've used it to create teaching documents so frequently. I use it quite a lot still today. We just take it for granted, don't we? Swiss watch company introduces the Swatch. Do you remember those? They were a huge fashion trend, weren't they? People went mad for them. And I couldn't afford to get one when I was a student. But one of my friends had one. I remember being quite jealous. And I think you could get different coloured straps for them. So again, it was an interchangeable fashion accessory. 1984, Band-Aid records Do They Know It's Christmas, which is obviously still a popular Christmas song today. It was a charity single to raise awareness and money for the famine relief in Ethiopia. 1985, the wreck of the Titanic is discovered. 1986, this fascinates me still. Chernobyl, the nuclear reactor, explodes in what was then the USSR. It's Ukraine now, isn't it? Did anybody watch Chernobyl on Netflix? I had to watch it. I'm fascinated by anything like that, anything to do with nuclear disasters. Yeah, so that had a big impact, didn't it? Mad cow disease, do you remember that, BSE? We don't hear much about that in the news, do we, these days? But that was discovered in 1986. Do you remember that MP who made his daughter eat a beef burger on TV to say that beef products were absolutely fine? I can't remember the name of the MP. I'm sure some of you will comment down below. 1987. Now, I was surprised by this. I somehow thought it was older than it was. The Simpsons made their debut on the Tracy Ullman show in America. Loved the Simpsons. We didn't get it in the UK until quite a bit later. I remember going on my honeymoon. I was very lucky. I went to Australia for my honeymoon, and it was being broadcast in Australia more frequently than it was in the UK. So before we went out for dinner on a few occasions, depending on time zones that we were in, we'd sit and watch The Simpsons. Margaret Thatcher was also elected PM for the third time, and work began on the Channel Tunnel, 1987. In 1988, the site of Shakespeare's original Globe Theatre is discovered in London. And finally, 1989, the Berlin Wall comes down. Who remembers that? I mean, that ended the Cold War, which was a marvellous moment in history. And also that year, the Nintendo Game Boy portable video gaming system was released. So there's a little snapshot, of the 1980s. Who remembers what? Comment down below. And if you're not commenting down below, you need to comment down below, because I do love reading your comments. Just very quickly to finish off, I've done a little bit of crafting this afternoon for the challenge that I'm going to enter. You've seen the card that I've made, but I've made this cute little tiny picture embellishment. So I found this little wooden frame, and I've stamped the little birdies on the branch on one of my little backgrounds, put acetate in the frame, a little bit of twine. This is vintage French linen thread that I got from somewhere. It's very soft. And then on the back, just to make it neat, I've stamped a bird on one of my little backgrounds, and then I've torn out of a dictionary that I bought, a little French pocket dictionary that I bought in a charity shop, because I don't like to destroy books, but I think if I bought them from a charity shop, it's okay. A little definition of, well, a bird and what the French word for bird is. So I've done that. I need to check the rules of this challenge. I think you've got to make 3 embellishments. I've made 3, but 2 of them are the same style, so I might make a 3rd one. I'm not sure yet. So I've decorated these tags. Well, I say decorated, it's a cream tag, and I've gone through a stencil, a Tim Holtz stencil. It's a recent purchase, with antique linen to get these splodges which look like age spots, and gone round the edge in again antique linen. And then on this side it is a picture from my Enid Blyton book that I'm cutting up, and I've watercoloured it just very subtly, and found house sparrow. I don't know whether it is a sparrow. I've made it a sparrow. Can you see the pale pink on the breast? Blue's just jumped up on my paper cutting machine, so if the camera wobbles, I do apologise. I've got to put some twine through there, and I should probably just add a couple of little pearls. I've got some chocolate coloured pearls and beigey coloured flat back pearls I might just put on, and I've put a little tiny bit of glossy accents on the bird's eye. I don't know whether the camera's picking that up. And then I've done the same with this one, so done the back so it looks like age spots, and then I've done this one portrait. So again, it's a picture out of Enid Blyton book, and I've watercoloured it, and in my mind this is a starling, and I've used my Cosmic Shimmers to give that kind of iridescent glow of the blue, green and purple. And I actually found in the book, how apt is this? He wears feathers of all colours, purple, green, violet and blue. Isn't that sweet? So I'm going to leave it there, guys. I did do a cooking video the other day, but it's rubbish. You can't see what I'm doing. The commentary is fine, but you can't see what I'm doing, so I'm not going to put that up. It was a Gusto one, but we're getting some more Gusto meals next week, so I shall do one then. My Cheese Geek video is going to go up soon, unboxing and tasting and an honest review. I've emailed them to see if they'll give me a discount code. I'm just waiting to hear back. They seem as if they're going to, so when I get the discount code I'll put that up. So thank you for stopping by, everybody. Thank you for your comments about Blue last night. I didn't want to leave you without anything to watch, so it was just a very short one yesterday of a little compilation of Blue's little antics, and I've enjoyed this little chat. Have you? Yeah, and the barista's behaving himself. I know some of you are getting a bit upset that he's not quite as flirty as he was. We need to get the balance right, don't we? But I'll be back soon. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Bye.